Good evening, and welcome to An Evening with Marianne Afifi. My name is Sarah Emerson, and I'm currently chair of the SJSU ASIS student chapter. Tonight's program is a presentation collaboratively organized by the SJSU ASIS student chapter and the Los Angeles chapter of ASIS. I'm so pleased that the LA chapter of ASIS has joined SJSU ASIS in co-sponsoring this event, and I hope that our two chapters will continue to hold collaborative programs in the future. Tonight's presentation will last approximately 1 hour, including time provided for a Q&A session after the presentation. At this time, I will now turn the mic over to Sarah Buchanan, the chair of the LA chapter of ASIS, who will introduce her organization. Following Sarah Buchanan will be Carletta Woods, vice chair of the SJSU ASIS student chapter, who has the distinct honor of introducing tonight's guest speaker. And without further ado, I give you Sarah Buchanan.
Hi everybody, this is Sarah Buchanan, and I just first wanted to thank Marianne, of course, for offering her time tonight. I'm really looking forward to this wonderful program. We are a great group to become involved in. The Los Angeles chapter of the American Society for Information Science and Technology has been active since 1961. Our chapter spans California, Nevada, Hawaii, New Zealand, and Australia. And California, of course, includes my alma mater, UCLA. I was once, of course, a student officer of our ASIS chapter as well. And we offer programs and also a professional network of library and information science professionals. We also have open officer positions. If anybody here would like to be in touch with me, I would love to tell you more, including program officer, treasurer, and other officer positions. Please be in touch with me, Sarah Buchanan, at sarahab@ucla.edu. Thanks so much, and I'll turn the mic back over.
Thank you, Sarah. This evening we are very pleased to present Marianne Afifi, Associate Dean of the Oviatt Library at Cal State University Northridge. In addition to the library's day-to-day operations, Ms. Afifi oversees a variety of library services and decision-making and fundraising efforts at the library, also emergency planning and facilities, as well as special collections and archives. Ms. Afifi recently served as the acting dean of the Oviatt Library. Previously, she held the position of Director of Electronic Resources and Special Projects Development in the Information Science Division of the University of Southern California, where she managed electronic information resource access, delivery, and development. She also provided leadership for digital library and systems projects, as well as online learning development. She was an active participant in the shaping of the library technology services in the Thomas and Dorothy Levy Library, one of the first state-of-the-art libraries that combined technology and library services. Her publications reflect her involvement in the library and information science community locally and nationally, as well as internationally. She served on the board of directors of ASIS National and is a member of the American Library Association, as well as the Association for Computing Machinery. Ms. Afifi holds an MBA from the University of Southern California and an MLS in Information Systems Design from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. Tonight, Ms. Afifi will address the roles of academic library administrators, what their work commonly entails, and how they fit into library and campus organizational structures. So, please join me in giving a very warm welcome and a virtual round of applause for Marianne Afifi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. I would like to thank the Los Angeles chapter of ASIS and San Jose State student chapter of ASIS for inviting me to give this presentation. I have to say that this is the first time I'm giving a presentation online, so this is a new thing for me, so forgive me if I hope I'm not going to mess up, but I'll try my best, and I'm really happy that there are so many of you that have joined in. Today I will be taking a look at library management in academic libraries mainly, because basically that's where I've spent my whole career and that's what I know most about. So I will be talking about the roles of academic library administrators, then talking about library and campus organizational structures, which basically are, very similar in most academic institutions, but there's lots of variety. So I will bring up some examples of that, and then I will be talking about some examples from my experience as a library administrator. And by the way, I've built in some time at the end for questions, and even so, we can probably have some people ask questions and I can answer them later. And also I will be available at any time via email or even phone if you have any questions that you want to ask me. Okay. So the academic library administration is basically usually in an academic institution, the top administrator in the library is called a dean. Sometimes they're called a director. Sometimes they're called a university librarian. These are pretty much the titles that people have. It depends how they fit into the larger organization, but I'll talk about this a little bit later. So these people are responsible for the budget, for all the personnel in the library, for the operations of the library and services, for the collections, the physical plant, not always. Sometimes the library is located in a building that's shared with others, so being in charge of the building isn't always the case. And these are just examples. Also, technology operations systems, computer technology, computer labs, etc., and also in many cases for fundraising. The fundraising often happens in both state universities and in private universities, but it tends to happen more actually in private universities, because basically private universities do have a whole fundraising machinery, whereas state universities have that too, but to a lesser extent, because their funds come largely from the state, although that is, as you know, changing as well. The person who is the top administrator often reports to a provost or vice president for academic affairs, or sometimes to a chief information officer. The chief information officer reporting relationship has only been fairly recent, and it's sometimes kind of a difficult situation, because the chief information officer tends not to be, in general, part of the academic side of a university. But that is sometimes the case. And these deans or the top administrators are part of the leadership of the campus. Just one more word about the previous slide. These days, people who are in administrative positions like that often have a doctorate degree, although that's really not necessary, and many don't. Some have a second master's, sometimes in a subject area, sometimes in some kind of administration, either business administration or public administration. So as I said before, the library is often part of the academic side of the university as opposed to the administrative side. What I mean by that is that the departments, the colleges, whatever has to do with the faculty and the students, that is what we sometimes call the academic side of the house. Now, in terms of universities, other operations, those are generally other vice presidents for physical plant, IT, etc. And those people are usually not in the reporting line. The top administrators are usually not in the reporting line. In some cases, library and IT organizations are merged, and that is an interesting thing, and that happened while I was working at USC. When I came there, the library was separate from the IT organization, and but then the dean was asked to merge both of these organizations, and that was an interesting few years. And after I've worked there for 13 years, and then when I left, they were just about to dissolve that again. So it worked for a while, but didn't always work. And that was also interesting because the library was on the academic side, and the IT organization was on the non-academic, the business side, administrative side of the house. But what it is really is that the top library administrator is a unique position on campus. So there's other deans, but most of the other deans are in charge of a college or a school. So they have students, whereas a library is a library. So it's a unique position, and that can have advantages and disadvantages. And in my experience, the top library administrators always have to make sure that they are, sitting at the same table with everyone else in the leadership. So it's a position that requires a lot of stamina. It's a position that requires a lot of advocacy because people tend to take the library for granted, and so you, as a top administrator, even not just a top administrator, any administrator really has to be an advocate for the library, but also not necessarily be in competition with all the other departments or schools or colleges, but collaboratively working with the deans and with programs, with centers, with student organizations. So in a way, that position provides kind of a nexus for many of the other academic and student organizations on campus. So the other library administrators are often called associate deans, like myself, associate university librarians, shortened to AUL. So if you hear that AUL thing somewhere, or if you work in a library, or once you work in a library, you will hear that. You might hear that AUL, so you'll know what that is. Sometimes they're just called heads, associate directors, department chairs. For example, we here at CSUN, we have our library has consists of two academic departments. We are the library, but we also have sort of a status like just like other colleges, even though we don't have our own students, but we are seen as in the big scheme of things, we're seen like the same as a college. And we have two departments, and we have departments chairs, just like an English department has a department chair. And these are also administrators. So this, if you will, second tier of personnel, they have a wide variety of responsibilities. Often there's someone in charge in collection development, reference, systems, personnel, digital projects, and it depends on the size of the organization. In smaller organizations, you will find that people wear multiple hats. For example, you would see that somebody for collections is also maybe responsible for technical services such as cataloging or metadata or whatever, or sometimes digital projects are connected with metadata. So it depends on the size of the library and of course the organizational structure, but smaller libraries will small libraries will have administrators wearing multiple hats or playing multiple roles. The traditionally defined roles, and those used to be strictly along the lines of, you know, collections, reference, etc. Those are changing also. So, you know, you're at the beginning of your careers, but if you you know, maybe when it's time for you to become an administrator, and I hope some of you are interested in becoming administrators, then perhaps at that point those roles will have changed somewhat, and what you're in charge of will be slightly different than what people are in charge of these days. So larger organizations tend to be quite hierarchical, that meaning many layers of tiers of supervisors, I should say. And but it is good in a larger organization. It is a good thing not to have too many people reporting to you. And I can tell you that as an administrator and manager, if you have 5, 6 people reporting to you, that is sufficient. Many more than that is much more difficult, because there are 10 people that you're really responsible to manage or make sure that they do their job and communicate with them. So just the communication is very time consuming if there are more than that. So therefore larger organizations tend to be more hierarchical just because of the sheer number of people. Then there are flatter organizations. These are often in smaller libraries because, as I said, the people wear multiple hats, so then they will be in charge of a larger chunk of the pie, and then there will be fewer people necessarily reporting to them. And that works also well if there's, you know, as I said, if there are not that many people. Sometimes mid-sized libraries have that same organizational chart. In my next slides, I have 3 examples which I just took from the internet. And Hunter College, you could just do a Google search and you will find more detailed slides. I only took 2 of their 6 slides that they provided, but just to show you what for example, an org chart for a library looks like. And then I looked for Yale Library, because Yale is a large academic library, one of the, you know, Big 10, so to speak, in terms of libraries. And they don't drill down into everybody, but there you will see that it's quite different. And then also I'm showing our own Oviatt Library organizational chart and showing, you know, the overview chart and then my areas, just to give you an example. I want to just take a quick break and make sure everything is okay and everybody can hear me, and I'm just talking away here. Just want to be sure everything is okay. If I don't hear anything, yeah, smiley faces, that's nice. Okay. All right, so here's the Hunter College. They made their, this one, the purple is the Office of the Dean. These are departments. These are programs, so they have this very structurally, every one of these layers has a different color and a different name. And then dark blue are units, which you will see in the next slide. So they have basically 3 areas that report to the dean. So this dean has only, and this is kind of a functional org chart where they basically, at this point, just tell you what the areas are. They're not telling you who the people are at this point. They're just saying we have research and instruction, we have content organization and management, and we have digital access and technology services. And you can see, you know, how this is organized. So presumably there's a person that's in charge of each of these areas. So we can see that this person here has a lot of departments reporting. So that's what so here's this person, and then he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people reporting to him, which is still a reasonable amount, number of people. Here you see, and then each of these has 2 or 3. So that, in terms of reporting relationships and managing people, that seems to be a very reasonable way to go. Okay, now here's the Yale University Library organizational chart. It's a little small, but if you, as I said, I just basically did a Google search and looked for these, and you can see here she's the university librarian, and then she has all these areas. These are collections and consortia and so forth, but she has 5 people here, and then all of these other people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 12 areas, 12 people really reporting to her. That's a lot of people, and that's quite different. On the other hand, it's Yale, and I happen to know this person, and she's extremely capable. But so this is quite hierarchical, because then each of these areas will probably have another whole bunch of people under them. So here's ours. It needs a little bit of updating, but basically our dean, and then he has all these people reporting to him. So here I'm here, and these are 2 areas that report to me: access services and special collections. And so when you go lower them, so I have these areas reporting to me, and then under these areas there's a supervisor, and they have other people, many student assistants also reporting. So these are just some examples of how organizations, but basically, this in our case here, basically this tier of there, mostly we have the dean, we have associate dean, we have assistant administrator, we have a manager of academic resources who is our financial person. We have somebody, special projects, who is responsible for a lot of the fundraising, and then basically we also have two department chairs, which are actually not on this org chart, but anyway, they're there too. So these are kind of the leadership people in the library. In about half of academic libraries, librarians are faculty and go through a tenure process. I don't know how many people know this, but it is something that's good to know when when you are applying for a job, because basically what happens in many libraries, the CSU, that is the case in for example. So you apply for a position, and if you're just coming out of a library program, and then you basically have to show a record of excellence in librarianship, and also in you have to publish and write articles and so forth. So, and you go through a tenure process, and tenure means basically up or out. So you either get it, or if you don't get it, you usually have a year to leave. So I'm just wanting to let you guys know this, because this is something important to know when you do apply for positions. In some libraries, librarians are academic staff, which is some kind of in between the regular staff and academic staff, and you may go through a similar process to tenure. It's not called tenure, but it's something similar. In other libraries, the staff are the same, have the same status as other employees, but that in academic libraries is generally more of the faculty and academic staff type of employees. So when you, for example, sometimes see titles for librarians, sometimes they'll say assistant professor, because that's the academic faculty title, even though you may be an instructional librarian and teaching, but you may also be somebody who is really not teaching, but you still have a title that's called assistant professor or associate professor, what have you. Just a second. Catch up with my notes. All right. So, what are the paths to management? I know it's kind of sometimes hard to think about it when you're in library school, but maybe that is the best place to do it. You have to have an interest in management. Now, you may not at this point necessarily know exactly what that's going to mean and where you're going to end up, but the interest should be that you want to be in charge of something and you want to bring creativity to your position and run something and be in charge of it. Some people don't like to be in charge of things and just want to do their own assignment, but others do, and if you have an interest, that goes a long way. You have to have good people skills, and I'll tell you one thing, I think almost every librarian is going to be in charge of something. So there's very few jobs in libraries where you're not going to be managing something. So just keep that in mind as you go through your programs and through your courses, because you will be somehow end up managing things. So nobody believes that when they first start out, but I can tell you it's true. So people skills are important because managing people, you just need to know, how to deal with people, and if you have opportunities to sharpen your people skills or whatever that in your career, I encourage you to do so. Otherwise, leadership skills, of course, you can, you don't have to. Some people are natural born leaders, some are not, but leadership can be learned, and it's not something sort of esoteric. There's definite steps that you can take, and definitely enough literature out there how to be a good leader. Even if you're just a leader of 2 people, it doesn't really matter. It's good to know, to be a leader. You have to have patience because things change every day, and as a top administrator, I can tell you I am a busy person, but I have to have patience because sometimes you just gotta wait for things to happen because you're part of a larger whole. Experience is good. Direct experience managing people is good, or indirect, just watching someone. If you know someone who's a good manager and you kind of observe that person and find out what they can do, that's perfect. And you can take those things and learn them yourself or apply them yourself. That's one way to get experience. Well, and just sort of as a hint, when a lot of people, when they start applying for positions after they finish a library program, they often will not put some other experiences they may have had in life on their resumes because they think that that their library experience is what's important. Yes, it's important, but if you have any other experience, if you were a manager in a store or you managed something else, you managed a baseball team, I don't know, something where you were involved, it always helps to put that on your resume. So the variety of experiences that you've had is important. If you've ever managed a project, even if it was just a project, a very small project, or if it was a project, a library program project, any kind of project that you were even co-managing, it's a good thing to have that kind of experience if you want to get there. These are all things that you can, if you are interested in management, seek out. It's nice to have financial experience because as a higher administrator, you will always have to deal with budgets no matter what, and you have to be able to project budgets in the future. You have to be able to project whether you can hire people, what kind of amounts you can spend on equipment, on collections, on everything. So it helps. Length of experience is not as important as results. So even if there are many people who have management positions that haven't really worked in libraries, for 20 years. I mean, if you've worked 20 years and you are applying for a position that your experience might count, a lot. But then the length isn't as important as the results you got as a manager of something before. The types of jobs that are paths to management are unit heads, for example, or team leaders, or managers of smaller groups, things like that. I mean, you can't go from you just have a job in the library for 1 year. It's very hard to go from that to being an associate dean, but just build on it. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't have to be long, but those are some paths to management. So now let me talk a little bit about my position and how I arrived at it, and special challenges and opportunities now in the future, and then the role of professional associations in my career. I'll just give examples as I go along. So what do? This is the other thing. People always say, well, what does a manager do? Often I've heard, well, they'll just sit there in their office and they're just telling us what to do. So this is sort of the conventional wisdom that you sometimes hear. But then, okay, so my job, this is part of my job, is carrying out the mission of the library, including strategic planning and decision making. I make decisions every day. I literally do. I mean, some are small, but some are bigger. And we always, every year, for example, we are asked to do a plan for the next year, what we will be doing. And that process is an iterative process where we obviously seek input from all people in our library. But it's something that is a very common thing among library administrators, planning and decision making. Day-to-day operations. In my case, I want to make sure that the library opens on time, that there are that the service desks are staffed, that the lights are on, things like that. People get services that we provide in a timely manner, that our customer service is wonderful, and every day there's something that could have gone better or whatever. So it's just one of many things that I do. I oversee special collections and archives. That means we have a huge archive. We have an automated storage facility, things like that, where all of these collections are. We have archives coming in. People call. They want to give us their archives. So these, we have to make sure that our books, special collections books, are in special storage. There's staff. There's a librarian that's in charge of the unit, but still we have a lot of things that happen every day about that. I supervise 3 staff employees and have a joint supervisory function for 3 librarians, because the librarians here report to the department chair, but then they also have some administrative things, administrative functions. And so it's really a joint supervisory function. So it's more than 5 people, but it's okay. At some point last year, I had 12 people reporting to me, and that was very difficult. So I oversee collection management activities. That means if we have to shift our books from because we have too many books, that's something that I'm responsible for planning, signage, things like that. One real important aspect of my job is to emergency and security planning. When I was in library school, I would have never thought that I would have to do anything like that at all. So if you know anything about the emergency and security planning, good for you. And if you're interested in it, learn about it, because we have in Northridge here, we had an earthquake many years ago. I wasn't here at that time, but we have, last year we had a potential shooter in the library. We have fires. We have all kinds of things. So we want to be sure we're all set for that. Well, that involves really the whole the whole building and the whole library. Excuse me for just 1 second. So So the other thing I supervise is library assessment activities. We have a strong instruction program, which we're assessing information literacy of students. We're assessing our service activities. So we also, you know, we are required to gather information and statistics on our activities. So in that vein, I'm also responsible for supplying statistics to the CSU, the Chancellor's Office, that collects statistics. The state collects statistics, and also there's National Statistics Service, ACRL survey. So I need to work with a lot of people in the library to get me all these numbers. I don't personally run all the numbers, but I'm responsible for collecting them and then inputting them into some kind of a database or a spreadsheet. We have a small digital archive activities, but we're gearing up to do more of that. So I'm also responsible for developing that. And something in my background is helping me with that, because I was responsible for that same thing at USC. And we are always, obviously, technology is changing all the time, and then we have a group of people who always really talks about technology and what's going to be our next steps in technology, not only in the systems we provide, the searches that we provide, and but also, you know, are we going to buy some iPads to loan out to students, for example? I coordinate special library projects, grants, a program here on campus called the Research Fellows Program. We have fundraising, we have people coming in with collections, and we would like them to donate us money so we can process these collections. I go to committee meetings, and when the dean is not available, I represent the library. So these are just, I don't want to go into a lot of details on these things, but basically, you know, there's something of what I just told you happening every day. My background is I had a BA in English and an MBA, and I worked as a financial analyst, and it wasn't very satisfactory, and I decided to go and enter the LIS program at UCLA, and I did an internship. So if you guys have internships, they often lead to good things. So I hope you can do internships, because in my case they actually led to a position. So I continued to work as a student worker there, but then I obtained a temporary and then permanent position, and I worked on electronic resources. So my path, you know, to being a manager, I worked on these different teams, like developing electronic resources. This was, you know, in the dark ages before the World Wide Web, and it was heavily project-based and heavily team-based. So you learn how to, you know, manage other people who work with you, or you learn to be managed too. That's another good skill. If you have a manager that works with you well, I mean, you can learn that sort of interaction with a manager. It's helpful when you are a manager. I worked on a collaborative project with 7 other universities, and you know, I was the manager of the project on our campus. So, you know, these are all steps that led me to this. I wrote some articles. I obtained continuing appointment, which was tenure at USC, and then I saw this position for associate dean, and there were things in that position that I didn't really know very much about, like intralibrary loan, for example. I, you know, had never managed the intralibrary loan unit, and I had never managed a circulation unit, but I did my research, and I said, well, you know, I think I can do this, and I tried to convince people that I can do it. So, you know, you don't have to necessarily have the experience, this exact experience for a manager. You just have to show that you can manage people, money, projects, time, things like that. So the experience translated, I had supervisory experience, I had the project management, my master's degree in business helped, but it's not necessary. I mean, it is absolutely not necessary. I knew how to put together a budget. I knew what the structure of our larger organizations. A lot of people who work in organizations just know their own, their own area. So the one other thing that's important, if you are interested in moving into management, know what the larger organization is. How does it work? How does it relate to the library? Why is it important that the English department has a very famous faculty, and why should we care? Things like that. Or why is it important that the president of the university is now all of a sudden doing something which could impact the library? I mean, these are the kinds of things that we in our daily lives we sometimes forget, that we need to look further beyond our own organization. I had experience with faculty governance that helped me to also, when you are in a faculty committee work is very important to as a next step to being a manager. Because once you've been on a committee, there's a give and take, and even if you haven't been the committee chair, it doesn't really matter. It does translate. I had experience with information technology, and I urge you to, as much as you can, get experience with information technology, because at some point you're going to have to make some information technology decisions, even though you may not be the expert. So you will have IT people or systems people recommending things to you, but do you really know what they are recommending is the best thing? So you need to know enough about information technology to be able to make decisions. All right, so now just want to tell you a little bit about the role of professional associations and how they help me really also with my management career. So as a student, I joined these associations, ALA, SLA, and ASIS. And then I participated in the local chapter of ASIS and won the student essay contest. And I went to the annual meeting of ASIS, and it was actually remarkable because people were so nice to me there at that conference, and I was just a student, and I didn't really, here were all these people whose articles I had to read, but they became, in the end, they became friends, and I still rely on friends and colleagues, really, and I still, as a manager, rely on some of these relationships that I formed with these folks. I've attended a lot of conferences, ASIS, almost every time, and I served on the board of directors of ASIS. So the role of professional engagement in becoming a manager is also important, because not only do you meet people, but they can also be they can also advise you and can be your sounding boards when nobody in your own organization or in your own area can do that. So I also went to other professional organizations, and as I said, connections with people help you. There's specific professional organizations such as library leadership organization for community of practice. You have a journal. You can also, if you're interested in management, you can look at these organizations to help you get started in management. All right, that's basically all I have for you guys today. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. As I said, I'm available at this email address if you have any questions, not within that you don't want to ask right now. If you want to talk to me or email me privately, that's fine too. The question is, I don't know whether everybody can read the question, but Cynthia is asking, you mentioned that you served as interim dean for 6 months. Could you talk about what it was like to transition in and out of that position? Was your job entirely different during that time, and were you also continuing to handle the duties of your associate dean position at the same time? Yes, I was continuing to handle my duties at the same time, although one of my colleagues took over some of my duties. So I didn't really handle all of my duties, but the transition was not very difficult because I was ready for it, but it was a flood of new things that I really never knew that the dean did. So there were a bunch of new things that I was responsible for, that I had to do, and especially what was interesting was the communication with the campus leaders. So all of a sudden I had to go to all these meetings with the provost and other deans and things like that, and there were decisions to be made for next year's budget. So I had to do a lot of things that I didn't really know my dean did. Some of them I did, and I did them, and luckily she was a good example for me. But it was interesting. I enjoyed it, but I also realized that it's a hard job. It's always nice if you have one more person above you, but at that point I didn't really. I mean, I had the provost, but still, it was. I enjoyed it, but it was also quite challenging. Another question was, how relevant is the mission of the library in your everyday work? Well, the library's mission is relevant. I mean, I don't start every day and say this is my mission, but you have to remind yourself of the mission, and whether if you're gonna start something new, for example, or a new project, or you want to go in a direction that the library is going, you need to remind yourself of, what is our mission? Does this fit into our mission? For example, one of our missions is really to provide information literacy teaching, and our librarians teach many classes. They work with faculty to bring the students into the library to have a class in the library about how to search, how to work in that specific class. So, and as we move forward with this curriculum, and this is our mission, we want to provide this information literacy training to the campus. Now, we are very successful, but this is the kind of thing is when you all of a sudden you're thinking, well, how am I going to move this, for example, into the online environment? We have mostly in-person classes because we want students to come into the library and experience the library. Because as you may know, some students don't come into the library until like the day before the exam, and so we want to encourage that physical presence. But we're starting to have many more online or hybrid classes. And how can we, for example, bring that into how can we bring information literacy education into this environment? And so then you look to our mission. Okay, how does this fit our mission? So we do try to keep things in the framework of our mission. Of course, missions are generally quite broad and many things fit into it, but sometimes something comes up and you say, well, does this really fit our mission? So, and then sometimes the answer is no.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to jump in here. I was curious about the balance between your job and also being, you mentioned that the library staff are also faculty members. How do you balance that? How do you balance all the job duties that you have versus the publishing that you have to do? And is there time taken into consideration for that, or is that something that you just do outside of your job?
Our librarians do have time that is assigned, so they have a time that's assigned for them to actually take care of the publishing and so forth. So a part of their assignment is, to take, some time. For me personally, because managers often, in my case, I am actually in a management position, which is I have something called retreat rights to the faculty. So if I didn't want to be an administrator anymore, I could just go back and be a librarian, and then I would have those same rights. Right now, I'm not given any extra time to do professional work, but so in essence, it's a matter of priorities, and I do some of it, and I work with other. In fact, I just received my now dean. At the time, he was not the dean here, Dr. Mark Stover, and another colleague from Fullerton. We wrote a chapter in a book. So basically, I did a lot of that on my own time. Someone asked what made me decide that you wanted a position in management. Well, one of the things that I found out is that whenever we had, a group of people involved, I often felt myself, but not really consciously, sort of taking a lead and say, especially early on, it was more like teams, but I wanted to take a lead and pull things together, because often if you're on a team, you have people with different ideas, different ways of doing things, and I always felt compelled somehow to pull these things together so that the team can then, produce something valuable. And I, as time went on, this happened, and then I said to myself, well, so that basically having that feeling, and then people came to me and asked me things too. I mean, people always said, no, I want you to be the team leader. So it was both my own sort of, not necessarily always conscious desire to be in charge of something, but then also people asked me to be in charge of something, not only my supervisors, but also my peers, which it's better when your peers ask you than when your supervisor asks you. When your supervisor, you do it, but it's flattering, and then when your peers ask you. So that's how I got to that. Yes, there are. Somebody asked, are there academic library positions without publishing work? The thought of publishing a perfect paper scares me. Well, you don't have to. First of all, nothing is ever perfect. So you strive for perfection, but sometimes you write a paper and it's good enough. So, but maybe not in library school, but in the real world, okay? But many places have, the requirements are sometimes stricter in some places and not so strict in others. But academic libraries generally do have some requirements. Some of them are things like you don't have to write a paper. You can do things like, do presentations. You still have to write something, or you have to present something at a conference and write an abstract or whatever. I mean, there are various ways of doing it. It depends what area of libraries you are in. For example, if you're in cataloging, there are different kinds of things that you can do. Also, if you are in archives, special collections librarians, they will to prove their academic worthiness, so to speak, they will do an exhibition. So there are many, because our jobs as librarians are so varied, it's sometimes, it's different for every type of a job. It doesn't always have to be a paper. It can be something else. For example, when I started, I was writing, I was coding, I was writing code and doing like web programming and things like that. So I was working a lot behind the scenes. So I did some things where I presented some things, and even some of the initial, now a website is nothing, but then producing a website, the 1 year after the World Wide Web was started, was a big deal. So so at the time, I had a web page that was was like a publication-like thing. So there are always equivalencies. Yes, I agree with Cynthia, because it doesn't mean it's perfect. Perfectionists, many librarians are perfectionists, and many of us are, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
Well, thank you, Marianne. Does anyone else have any other questions? We're at 7:01, but if people have questions, I want to give them an opportunity. Does anyone have? Okay, I'll release the mic to you, Ellie.
Sorry, I had one more question. I was really interested in your comment about library and IT and how you worked at a place where library and IT were merged, and then you found that didn't work. Do you find that most of the IT work is done in-house now, where you are? And in your opinion, is that the best model? I'm really curious on your take on that, having seen both sides.
Well, in our case, we do have a relatively small systems department, but we find that is very useful, and having people in-house doing some of this, because when you are a customer, so let's say you have an IT department, and we have an IT department, and we are using the IT, the email, and so forth. But there are some things, for example, our web server, we like to keep the web server to ourselves, because we have so many different things that we load on our web server than your sort of standard IT environment. So we want to keep some control. Some things are easier if they're just outsourced to an IT department, and you are a customer and you let them do it, like server maintenance and so forth on other servers. But our web server, for example, is a good example for us to just want to keep some of that control in-house. And even in the merged organization, we were merged, but there were still a lot of things separate, and we actually, different parts of the organizations were clients of other parts of the organization because of the expertise they had. So it's difficult to say, but I would say that it's good to still have some control over certain aspects of your IT environment, especially with customizing, for example, all our electronic resources, the website and how you present that and so forth. Also your integrated library system, that is nice to have control. You should have control over that. So it depends what it is, but I think there are some things that are better done in-house, and others can just go and be outsourced to an IT department, generally on campus, but theoretically you could outsource it somewhere else too, but that's typically not done as much. I think certifications, they can't hurt. They really can't. And if you're looking for a more IT related job in libraries, I mean, to me, in my experience, almost anything that you have in addition to your library degree can help you in some way or another. It may not always be apparent in the beginning of a job or in the job you're in, but I think it just comes in handy. I mean, I didn't really use my MBA for a while, but then then I did use it because now I'm really a manager and some of that helped me. So technical certifications certainly, IT certifications certainly help. I mean, if you're going to be a reference librarian, you might be in a position where everybody's going to ask you millions of IT questions. But you know, I had a colleague. She had a computer science undergraduate degree, and she was really a whiz in computer science. But she really wanted to be a reference librarian. So she became a reference librarian. But I'm certain that she would provide a lot of people with systems and computer and IT advice of any kind in her whole career.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, last chance, I'm going to hand it back over to our current chair, Sarah Emerson. And again, my thanks goes out to you, Marianne, and I hope everybody joins me here in our virtual applause for the evening. And I'll hand the mic over to Sarah.
Well, thank you very much, Marianne, for your fantastic, informative presentation tonight. Listening to you speak this evening has been a pleasure, and we are grateful that you shared your knowledge with our 2 chapters. For those attending who are interested in becoming involved with SJSU ASIS student chapter or the LA chapter of ASIS, our 2 chapters web links are provided on the current slide. Thank you again to everyone for attending this program, and I hope you have a good evening. Good night.